Sorry, yes, we're recording the session today. So, Edwina Dwi and dwi'n gweithio a ganolfan gwasanaethau cyhoeddus gydaeddol. I'm Edwina and I work for the Centre for Digital Public Services as their Head of Comms and Engagement. Welcome to this, our final knowledge sharing webinar of the year. It's been a busy year for us here at the CDPS and we're delighted to be bringing this topic as our final one for the year. Most of you are familiar with Zoom as a platform, but it's a Zoom webinar, not a meeting. So I'm just going to give a couple of tips that will hopefully help make it work smoothly before I explain the format of the session. So you will join on mute, so you don't need to worry about the mute button. But when you do want to ask a question, there are two ways that you will be able to do this. You can click on the questions button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. If you can't see the raise the hand button, click on participants and it should become visible there. The other way to do it is to pop your question into the questions tab and we can pick them up from there at any time. That would be absolutely great. And we're hoping there'll be lots of questions around this and we'll put the questions to the panel then. As I said, you know, contributions are welcome in Welsh. We have an interpreter, Neris, here. So hello, Neris and Croeso. If you're not a Welsh speaker, you will need to listen to the English. So go to the globe at the bottom of your screen and select English. But if you're a Welsh speaker, as we say, you won't need to do that. If you have any technical issues, please pop them in the chat function. My colleague Gemma is on hand to help. I can just see her giving a little wave there. We'd also encourage you to use the chat function as well to talk among yourselves. I think by the look of things, you know, we're going to be running and operating in a virtual world for quite some time yet. So it's really about using the technology that we have to try and build our network. So pop your name in there, pop which organisation you're from, and if you have any experience of user research or user-centred design, that would be great for others to know as well. And yes, we are recording the session. We've got a really good turnout today. I think we had about 60 people registered, but we know a number of people couldn't make the session and the recording will be available along with a write-up on our website and our social media channels later on this week. We would encourage you to tweet from the session as well. So if you are on Twitter, our handle is @CDPS_Wales. So please do use the Twitter handle if you are on there. So in today's session, we're going to be looking at the role of a user researcher and user-centred design. I'm sure you're aware that we've got 12 digital service standards in Wales and they're categorised into 3 themes. And one of those themes is meeting user needs. So the standards state, user needs should drive service design, whoever those users are. User needs matter more than the constraints of business structures, organisational silos and technologies. And that's what we're going to explore with our guest speakers today. We were due to have 3 speakers, but unfortunately, David from the National Library for Wales is unwell and unable to make it today. He is hoping to share his experience, but I'll come on to that when I do a wrap up and a summary at the end. But fear not, we've got 2 fantastic speakers lined up. So the first one is Amelia Still. Amelia is a user researcher here at the CDPS, and she's focusing on the work we're doing around skills and capabilities. And she's going to give you a very practical session looking at what a user researcher does. We're going back to basics with this because we know quite a few attendees are new to this and we feel that it's important to cover the basics. And then we're going to speak to Tom Norman. So Tom is the head of service design at Barnardo's, and Tom is going to talk about how they have approached user-centred design in various aspects of their work at Barnardo's, and he's got some lovely examples to talk about in his presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand to Amelia.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Amelia, I'm a user researcher, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I do in my day-to-day job. So as a user researcher, what do I do? We've got a couple of pictures on this slide of my usual and less usual day at work. So we've got here, one of them is me creating a cardboard user interface for Everyone is a Researcher Day. And I'm in the underground car park at BBC Broadcast Centre, very glamorous. And then we've got a picture of myself and Gareth Ford-Williams, who's an accessibility expert, dressed up as research boffins about to present that day, where we got a whole UX team to go out and interview people and come back and solve a problem and create user interfaces out of cardboard. And then one of the more usual things that I might be doing is a picture of a big mental model up on the wall. And we were looking at how might we statements for the BBC Sounds app to try and use the data we got from user interviews to try and solve problems and create a better design. So, next, sorry. So the main parts of my job are trying to understand who, what, how, and why. So first of all, I want to understand who our users are. And the people using our products or our services, or who we hope might use them, are not all the same. Shock, horror. This is very inconvenient for us because they're all different and they all have different needs. So in order to make something for them, we need to know a bit about them. And for me, along with human-computer interaction, I studied ergonomics, and ergonomics is all about making the physical things fit the size, the shape, and the capabilities of human body. And when we're designing digital products or services, it's really the same thing. We need to make the things that we are creating fit the way people are and not expect people to contort their behaviours in order to use our services. So if a product or a service is a good fit for a person's needs, they're going to be much more likely to use it, and they're going to be less likely to need help. And this benefits them, and it also benefits us, because it means that people are getting a better access to public services, and it means we spend less time sorting out their problems with our service and more time actually helping them make their lives better. So the second thing here is what? What are they trying to achieve? And people might have different goals when they're using a service. And often the task that we're helping them achieve is actually, it's a means to achieving a more important goal for them. So if someone's online trying to apply for a passport, that's really so maybe they can go on holiday or visit family. They're not just getting a passport for the sake of it. And similarly, if people might be interacting with a healthcare service, they're doing that possibly because of something wrong. They might be anxious, they might be less able to concentrate on what they're being asked to do. And their end goal is maybe to get advice or treatment and to get well. And it isn't really to be there filling out lots of forms and looking up lots of terminology in order to access the service. So next. The next questions are how and why. So how are they going about that? We want to know how people are approaching the task. Is there a certain order they're doing it in, or is there a certain tool they're using? What are the other elements around this that we haven't yet considered? And if we know how people are going about something, it can give us a good idea of what we should be making. So as we want to make something that fits the person, first of all, what we look at is how they want to do it, and then we try and design something that matches the way they would go about doing it. And the other question here is, why does it happen in that way? So why do they do it in that way? And this is very closely linked to the how, because often there's a good reason for the way in which we actually do something. For example, if we're applying for a passport, the first thing we're going to do is go and get a suitable photograph. And there's an order in which we need to go through that task. An example of this recently for me on a project was a project for the prison service, and they were hoping to replace all of the letters people write to people in prison with electronic messaging. And they were hoping if they built a better, quicker, cheaper electronic messaging service, then people would stop writing letters, because letters are a way that drugs get into prisons. But when we interviewed friends and family, and we interviewed some people in prison, we found out quite quickly that for both sides, a personal letter is about a lot more than sending information. So the actual writing of the letter is something that the family feel really important about, and it makes them feel closer. And the person receiving the letter really likes something handwritten on actual paper that they know the person spent a lot of time on, because it shows they care. So the electronic message isn't really a replacement, and the way they go around doing that is actually as important as what they're doing. Sometimes we do something in a certain way because there's a problem. Something's broken, or the current product is poorly designed. So at the BBC, our original intranet site was so difficult to use that what happened was people just used to email each other links to the places that we wanted to get to, because they were like these little secret doors into the places, because nobody could actually use it properly. So this was an insight into the fact that something needed to change and it wasn't very well designed. So as I say, by asking why a person does something like this, we might uncover an opportunity to make an improvement. So next slide. So what's in my toolkit when I'm doing this? Well, user researchers have a whole bunch of things, disciplines that they've learned in order to do this, from things like ethnography and psychology, various different methodologies, information design, interaction design, all of this. But actually, if we look at the next slide, we'll see that the basics of what we do, and I don't know if this little thing might play for us. Yeah, the basics of what we do is quite simple. The gold standard is observing. And on this little clip, this is me observing the squirrel in my garden doing an A/B test between which food is better, nuts or oatmeal. Clearly the squirrel's got a choice out of A or B. But yeah, if we can go out and actually observe what people are doing and watch them doing it, that would be the best thing to do, because that way we won't miss out on important details, such as the order they do something, the tools they're using, and the environment they're doing it in. So is it noisy or crowded? Is it well lit or poorly equipped? And what else is going on around them when they're trying to do it? If we can't actually go to them, then the next thing we would do is talk to people. We'd ask them open questions, and we'd spend plenty of time going into detail about the situation and what they might want or need. And then we'd also look at any data we've got, especially if it's an existing service. So is the part of the service where lots of people give up, or is the part of the service when they spend much more time there than we might expect? Or is there something where we ask them to send us information and we consistently get the wrong information from them? Maybe we're not framing that in a way that they understand. So this again tells us something about possibly where improvements could be made. So next slide. And the final part of the puzzle, if you like, is turning the information into design. And what I would say here is, this goes across the whole process, is getting the team involved, and people talk about it being a team sport, is one of the most important things you can do as a user researcher. So when you're finding out about your users, you can take them out to do the observations with you and take notes. You can get them to sit on interviews. You can get them even to help you analyze the data, or at least discuss what the outcomes are from your sessions. Getting the perspectives of the whole team helps to avoid bias and one person's view of how things are. Get lots of different perspectives. And it also means that as the team starts to create the service, everyone understands what the user needs are firsthand. They didn't just read the report. And it gives people a really good sense of how to do their part of the job. And overall, this means that when we're trying to embed the user needs and the goals, the pain points that we've discovered into our own product or our service, everybody understands what we're trying to achieve, and it makes the whole thing much quicker and easier than just reporting back to them. So, yep, that's a little bit of insight into my life as a user researcher.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Amelia. Really insightful. I certainly have a couple of questions, and I hope other people on the webinar will too. So that's a reminder, if you have any questions, raise your hand using the little hand button at the bottom at the end of the session, or pop it in the questions and answers function now, and we'll pick it up at the end as well. So thank you very much, Amelia. That was great. I'm going to hand over to Tom Norman now. So Tom, as I said, is Head of Service Design at Barnardo's. Tom, looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So over to you, please.
Thanks, Edwina. So yeah, I just wanted to say hello to everyone, and thanks very much for the Centre of Digital Public Services, Cymru, for inviting me to talk at your webinar today, and also thanks to Amelia for a great presentation. If we could roll to the next slide, please. Oh yeah, there we go. So Barnardo's, just to give you a little bit of a background on Barnardo's and my team, the Innovation Lab team. So Barnardo's is basically a 150-year-old charity that's on a journey to transform children's social care across the 4 nations of the UK. My team's responsible for leading a transformation of the whole organisation, and this essentially means inspiring it to take a human-centred, data-driven approach, evidence-based approach to all operations, products, services, and to build up iteratively from small beginnings to big ideas. So I wanted to describe Barnardo's journey into using human-centred design as a kind of conscious approach. Around the beginning of 2017, as you'll see from the slide here, Barnardo started to develop a digital transformation team. It took on 3 main areas to help Barnardo's develop a more digital focus. And these areas were 1, service design and research, 2, making digital products, and 3, developing a digital data strategy. Many members of the digital team, including myself, had kind of brought many years of experience working with Government Design Service, or GDS as you may know it. So we were able to bake in some of those design principles, as well as discovering and defining some of our own. And we managed to do this to be able to influence some of the work and some of the wider, the wider organisation. So then from about 2020 onwards, the digital team shrunk and refocused as a more centralised team to continue to develop service design and research and develop digital products. And the success of these practices and our objectives are completely reliant on research and human-centred design. And that's really, I guess, why I'm here to talk to you today. So if we could roll to the next slide, please. Okay, so question is, where is Barnardo's as an organisation in this process of, understanding the need for a human-centred design approach? And I suppose more specifically with a focus on the needs of children, young people and their families. So, this slide really speaks to the whole thing around creating cultural shifts in large organisations, and the fact that it just takes time, but from our perspective, I'd like to say that thankfully we've come a long way, and this is now an active conversation. Human-centred design, human-centred approaches are an active conversation amongst many different teams within Barnardo's, and for good or bad, our team is pulled in so many different directions. Our heads are kind of spinning, So that probably means we're kind of on the right track with it. Something that's helped has been a much greater investment into our voice and influence team, which has been fantastic, and who we cross over with in many ways. So yeah, that's been really valuable. If we could roll to the next slide. So, you know, as you know, developing some core principles are the cornerstone of building and encouraging good practice. And so I just wanted to introduce you to some of ours. We focus primarily on the experiences of our children, young people and families, and we actively seek out and try to listen to children, young people and families, as well as our own colleagues within children's services. And a lot of that is all about, that starts with building that trust, because we can't develop those relationships without that trust. So this is a really crucial aspect. We use ethical research methods, that some of which are very common, some of which we've developed ourselves for our own specific purposes. And we've done this to get to grips with whoever it is we're engaging with, how we engage with them to understand their strengths and what their needs might be, and also, very importantly, to kind of meet them where they are, and develop this sense of equity. So we're not coming at it from this high level, we're meeting them exactly where they are. And also, essentially holding the lived experience of others to with the highest regard. You know, I mean, that has to be absolutely our cornerstone of where we start and where we finish. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of a reference to kind of sort of roughly how we're doing stuff. We kind of start, and you know, this might be something. I know this is something that teams, your teams are doing themselves as well. We start by trying to understand what the right problem might be, and this will involve engagement with those who are most affected by whatever service or product we're seeking to develop. For us, the people using a service or product will be both children and young people, but in many cases it will also be a service user, a service worker. So what you might call a user. Few issues with that, with the term user, because it's very generic, but we would generally consider those to be both the children and young people and the service worker that would be delivering a service to them. We use agile methodologies to structure our work. So we don't try and do everything at the same time. We take small steps through research, ideation, sketching, prototyping, testing, and then evaluating that. And then we start all over again. And you know, this helps us to learn quickly by putting our ideas out into the real world as early as possible. And it also de-risks whatever it is we're doing, because we're learning really quickly and we're not putting too many eggs in one basket and trying to develop something that will just never work. We believe it's better to learn quickly and do it well before spending, you know, lots of time and money on making a finished product. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So yeah, I just wanted to show you some examples of work that we're doing that has a really strong human-centered design and research process, and looking at those in different ways. So I guess something that's more kind of product-based would be something that we're doing called, we're making an app called Journey, and it allows care experienced young people to communicate in a much better way with their service workers, and to be able to work on their goals and objectives. The vision for creating this piece of work, for creating Journey, is based around young people having more meaningful and collaborative communications with their project workers. It's all about work done with them rather than done to them. So, you know, as such, human-centered design and research has played a crucial role in the development of this particular digital product. And we're really conscious that, you know, as we're making products and digital products, that technology just isn't a silver bullet for the bigger picture that we're trying to engage with here. So it's not going to solve the complex issues surrounding young people, but an app like Journey is a valuable tool that can support young people and staff develop much better relationships and represent the voice of young people, and in a much more of a regular way, and also to create a kind of sort of evidence-based approach, so that the learnings can be kind of built on and relationships can be strengthened and deepened. So yeah, just finding ways to create new ways to interact and communicate, to prepare young people in care for life in the outside world. And this has required some intensive research with both care experienced young people and also the service workers that support them. So if you could roll to the next slide, please. Fantastic, thanks. So another piece of work that we've done at Barnardo's is some work we've been involved with called Care Journeys. It's something that at Barnardo's we call a core priority programme. And Barnardo's has invested over 7 years to work with local authorities and other partners across the UK to get more care experienced young people into what we call positive destinations. And a lot of this work has involved, particularly from my team's perspective, has involved co-production with young people in and leaving care. And this, I suppose, really is at the sort of high end of a human-centered design and research approach. So the approach of this work as well, we've come at through a systems change lens, which means really focusing on the root causes of some of the issues, which in turn means focusing on those most affected by those systemic issues, which are the young people. Interestingly, when this piece of work started, the assumption, there was an assumption that it was all about getting really good housing situations for young people. But as we did co-production work with young people, we quickly learned that young people can have the best living situation that they could hope for, but that still might not give them a positive destination, because there are other things come into play, for example, depression, substance abuse, and different kinds of areas of abusive relationships in their lives, which can create difficulties. So we very quickly started to get to some root causes, which we identified, or rather the young people identified as loneliness and social isolation as the biggest core factors which really affect their lives. So with that in mind, we use those as a kind of guiding principles for these two partnership programs, both in Plymouth and London Borough of Brent. And our focus, the focus of this work is very ambitious. It's about ensuring that care experienced young people will be as or more likely to be in a positive destination or a good place in their lives compared to their peers who've not been in care. So as you can see, very ambitious. We're using a kind of, as I said, a systems change approach. So we're at slightly different stages in both of these particular geographical project areas, but everything's been co-produced with young people, and again it relies entirely on ethical, human-centered design research. So co-production, co-design have been core to our approach in creating youth-led change within these two particular areas, and we're constantly having our assumptions challenged and plans thrown out of the window, and finding a hope and progress where we didn't expect to find it. It's highly emergent work. So as you can imagine, we have to do a lot of pivoting constantly, because we're both engaging with what young people we're working with are uncovering, but we're also having to play that back to our partners and get our partners to engage with that. So yeah, this is really it's very, very intensive work, but also it's very interesting in this particular user-centered design and research approach. Can I go to the next slide? And this is my last example, which kind of looks at the importance of human-centered design to develop evidence. Ooh, if we could pop back, I think that's the last. Oh, you go back a few slides. Thanks. Yeah, great. So yeah, this last example is about this human-centered design approach to develop evidence that can build and support a major strategy focus for an organisation. So in November last year, the Innovation Lab and health teams at Barnardo's conducted 6 workshops with across Barnardo's regions and nations with around 70 colleagues. And they were essentially representing all levels from project workers to regional directors. And we wanted to understand the value of Barnardo's current offer to the health of children, young people and families, and also what a future value might look like to them. And you know, we really needed to involve the kind of insights and thoughts around the regions and nations in shaping Barnardo's future health strategy. So our process for this would obviously be a consultative workshops that we would run with very clear agendas and highly engaged colleagues. And it was actually wonderful to get some of these conversations going where you start to realise that everyone really is working in silos, and you know, creating these opportunities for colleagues to speak and share ideas, share insights, share practice was really, really valuable. But our process always includes, with it, when we're doing this kind of work, always includes obviously running the workshop, but then doing a lot of work around synthesizing all of the things that we're hearing, theming and analysing the research insights, but also making sure we send a "you said, we heard" feedback to all the participants to make sure that we've collected an accurate account of everyone's experience, but also to make sure that this process is as equitable as possible to everyone involved. And this is really important because it's all about, this is relational work, and it's really about developing really strong relationships and making sure that people feel heard, people feel that they've been listened to, and that they can see some of the things that they've talked about in the strategy that you go to develop. So it's important to make sure that they understand that as well. So collecting these valuable insights allowed us to develop a highly credible strategy for a health and social care plan at Barnardo's, but also to develop service blueprints and models of delivery that will eventually create and develop some real and hopefully valuable health and social care services at Barnardo's. So those are the 3 examples I really wanted to share with you around how, you know, the value and power of research, evidence-based design, and the engagement of people around you that can really develop these strategies, digital products, and systems change at a much bigger level. So if we could just go to the last slide, I just wanted to finish off with one of my favourite quotes from Clinton Farquharson, MBE, who's a Black disabled co-production practitioner with lived experience of health and social care. And I think this really speaks very much to the work that we're doing in this space. You know, we really need to kind of just move beyond the convenient. And the way we do that is we delve into people's experiences to really discover what this work is all about. And with that, I'm going to close. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. Lovely to hear it in the context of kind of product services, but also that strategy approach that you talked about there at the end as well. We've got a couple of questions. So let me see. Sam and Amy, be ready. We're going to bring you in now very, very shortly. But yeah, really fantastic. One of the questions that we're going to kick it off with is around terminology. We build this as kind of user-centered design. You talk a lot about human-centered design. What would you say the difference is? And yeah, if you could just explain that a little bit more, Tom, that would be great.
Yeah, I guess, well, I mean, I think terminology is terminology, and terminology is something that we have to understand is flexible and also contextual. So flexible in the sense that it will always change as we develop our understanding, or perhaps we change our perspectives on something, but also contextual in the particular area that we're working in. Having worked for myself, and I'm going to speak on a personal level here, having worked through a lot of government design services where the terminology is very clearly about users and service users. There's sometimes talk of that being redefined as citizens as well, because essentially those services are based around citizens, which is essentially everyone, isn't it? However, I really, I guess over the years, I've really wanted to change my terminology to talk about a human experience, actually, rather than trying to fit ourselves either into sort of small boxes or something that's very, very opaque. In terms of a user, I find the term user a little bit impersonal. I find yes, it describes a wide range of people, which is useful, but I feel sometimes that, I guess the reason I personally like to use human, the word human in that context, is because it's very easy for people to forget that we're designing for other humans, we're designing for people. And I like to always bring that focus back into the fact, so we can relate it to ourselves. So we can say, if my mother was using this, or my brother, or my cousin, or my neighbor was using this, how would they use it? And I think really for me, that's why I like to define it as such.
Lovely, thank you. A couple of questions. So we're going to bring Amy in first. Amy, we're just going to take you off mute. So if you want to pop in and ask your question, that would be great.
Oh, sorry, was it Emma?
Amy.
Or Amy. I'm not sure whether she's just had an emergency phone call.
Oh, no worries. We'll put it to you then, Tom, if that's okay. So Amy's asking, who makes up your voice and influence team to support some of this work?
Yes, so, luckily, as I was saying, we've recently had a kind of much bigger investment into that space, which is fabulous. We have a really enthusiastic and energetic head called Josh Harshant, and he's really he's come into post, I suppose. I think it was around the middle of last year, so it was kind of the height of COVID, really. Previous to that, we'd had, that particular team were there, but they were there at a very minimal capacity. However, Josh has managed to bring up a lot more people into his team to be able to develop a new vision and strategy for that. It's really valuable for us as a team, because previously, in terms of co-design and co-production, it really was us delivering all of that. It was us defining what our ethical standards were for doing research with children and young people, and particularly those who are part of our services. And so, you know, we did a bunch of things around developing very clear protocols and processes around how we do that. We developed some tools and toolkits around how to do that. One of the tools I could mention would be prompt cards, where if young people didn't feel they could actually verbalize something in a kind of testing and prototyping workshop, we could give them a card to be able to give to us that could say, I feel uncomfortable, I don't want to answer, I want to leave. So we always wanted to hold you know, the consent of young people to the highest regard. So a lot of those tools have been kind of sort of taken across, and they're shared amongst our teams, because we do have, and we have regular meetings, because we're really conscious that we're part of a kind of bit of a Venn diagram, really, where we really do cross over, and we try and help and help each other as much as we possibly can. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think you know, we have I think within the voice and influence team, there are some about 3 or 4 practitioners, 2 program directors, an assistant head, and a head of that particular team.
Lovely. Sounds like a great resource, and it could make an interesting follow-up session to this. So Amy, we'll explore that. Thank you very much. The next question is probably aimed at both of you. So I'm going to take Sam in to ask this question. Sam Hicks, please.
Oh, hi. I was just interested, as somebody new and keen to learn more about user research, is there a particular resource that you could point someone in the direction of as a starting point, whether it's a book, a paper, website, YouTube video, whatever it is, really, to help kind of with upskilling personally or to explain to colleagues?
Amelia, do you want to take that first, please?
There's a lot of resources online. The first book I read, and I still recommend it to people now, is a book called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. And the title of the book, Don't Make Me Think, is basically saying if your users need to think, then you're not doing it right. They need to just be able to do it without thinking. But the book is written in such a sensible, common sense way. You don't need to learn loads of terminology. He will explain the whole idea of it's quite focused on task-based testing, but it's a very good starting point. But there are a lot of resources out there, and I think we could probably share some after this session to get started. What would you say,
Tom?
You kind of stole my thunder there, Amelia.
Oh, sorry. See,
no, not at all. Because actually, that would be my go-to very first port of call, I think. Steve Krug's absolutely fantastic. Javid Spool is also really good. Somebody really good to look out for as well. And and if you can watch any videos of his, he's a really engaging speaker as well. But I think, you know, I do think that going and looking at some of the stuff in the service manual, the service standard manual of gov.uk is also a really good place to start, because a lot of those things have been tested for ad infinitum for years and years and years, and they're constantly being updated, as far as I'm aware. And they ask that there are some just really good standards in there, and they're written in a very accessible, open way as well. So I think those would be some really good. Those could be some really good starting points for you.
Yeah, so a couple of stocking fillers there for you for Christmas, Sam. Just to say as well, so when I outlined this session, I talked about the digital service standards for Wales and the theme around user-centred design. We've got an interim head of standards starting in the new year, and one of their roles is going to be looking at how we bring the standards to life, what good looks like. So do watch this space, Sam, on that, because we'll be putting into the mix there lots of examples of kind of, as I say, what good looks like, and examples of organisations who are doing this well. We're also running some training. I'm going to bring my colleague Peter Thomas in just very briefly to talk about this. And obviously Amelia is in Peter's team leading on kind of the user research around this. So Pete, for somebody like Sam who's new to this, just give us a brief flavour of kind of what the CDPS is doing to support, please.
Right, we are. Thanks, thanks, Ed. We were very conscious that this is a critical skill that we'd like to spend some time and effort working on, and encouraging people like yourself, Sam, to get up to speed and understand its importance and relevance. So we will be running some training in the next couple of months. We've run a couple of sessions now. The feedback has been absolutely brilliant for the feedback for the sessions that we've run. So we're looking to run some more. We're looking at some introductory courses, just sort of explaining the basics, taking it maybe a step further than what we've heard today. But we've also been running some quite intense 2 sessions a week, hands-on, practical, real-life user research training as well. So user research fundamentals, and we're looking at doing something similar in the new year. So follow us on Twitter. It's probably the best advice, really, or drop us a line. I was going to put the email in the chat, so I'll do that now as soon as I've finished.
Lovely, thank you, Peter. And similar to what Tom said in terms of, de-risking and iterating and making sure that, the product or service is what people will need and will use. That's what Amelia is going to be working on. Amelia, do you want to give us a flavour of the types of thing you're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks? Yeah.
So we're working particularly at the moment on the Digital Academy, which is going to be delivering training mostly around all around digital transformation. And the team did a discovery phase before I joined, and they've captured a lot of the high level needs of all the people from public sector organisations who are going to come onto the courses. But as we start running the courses, we're going to do a couple of iterations that are going to be very research focused. And I'm going to be doing questionnaires, and I'm going to be doing interviews with people. And I'm not only going to be asking them about the actual course sessions and what they learned. In fact, a lot of our focus is going to be on things like, did their broadband work? Were they able to take notes properly while they were looking at a screen? Were the materials used for them when they got back in the workplace? Things around accessibility and inclusion, neurodiversity, all sorts of areas like this. So again, although this is training, eventually it is a whole service. And as we work on that part, we're starting to spread out our focus as well. And eventually we'll be researching what happens from the very beginning when people think about the idea of wanting some training till way past the end of the actual courses, as to what happens when they get back to the workplace and how well they were able to implement it, and what barriers there might have been there that we could also help design for in the long term. So yeah, the research will gradually spread out along that timeline, if you like, to understand all of that.
Lovely. It's going to be a busy time, Amelia. Thank you. And Peter has put the email address in the chat. So if you're interested, drop the team a line there. We've got a question here for Tom from Jess. Jess, if you'd like to take yourself off mute and come in, please.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Hi, Tom. I've got a question, which is, what advice would you give to a third sector organisation who are early on in their journey to build in-house user-centred design capability? And by early on, I mean pretty much at the start of that journey.
Sure. I mean, I think some of the best approach is to start to try to define what some of the right problems. So generally what we do is we'll start very wide, and then we'll try to sort of come in, sort of be much more specific as we move into that. But I think a lot of it will be about kind of engagement across your organisation, try to identify specific areas, and perhaps categorise them in some way. Doing some stakeholder mapping is always really valuable, because you really need to understand who it is that can instigate change and who can make decisions. Who do you need to influence in this space? That would be a really valuable starting point. I think really trying to get underneath where the issues lie, because quite often you'll have lots of people that have been working in an area for a very long period of time, and they'll say, well, of course it's this, of course it's that, because they've been working in that space for a long time. But until you start really interrogating what those issues are actually about, you're not going to be able to start tackling them properly. And what that might entail is, it might entail starting to kind of theme some of these areas and then starting to drill down into them. But also there's going to be that obviously prioritization exercise to say, what are the most important things for us to tackle first? But I think it's just really doing that kind of initial mapping exercise to say, what kind of landscape are we sitting in here? And I think trying to focus your efforts around trying to point yourselves in the right direction, because obviously you're going to be taking a journey from this point onwards. You're going to be sort of stepping out in a particular direction or another, and it's really about getting your kind of compass coordinates right, so that you know that you're going to be heading out in a really good way. You're really prepared for the journey that you're going to go on as well. So and also you have the support of the right people to be able to do that effectively, I think.
Really good advice, and I think that's advice not just for the third sector, but any organisation that provides a public service, in terms of really being clear on what the problem is to start off with. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for the question, Jess. And Jess, I know you spoke at one of these webinars way back, maybe 12 months ago, on this very topic. So great to have you here. Are there any further questions for either Tom or for Amelia? And just look. I think one of the things that we'd be interested in is seeing if there's an appetite for, how we share this practice. I know at the last webinar, there was a discussion around, a community, potentially a community of interest or community of practice. I know there's a couple out there in Wales already, such as UX Wales, Service Design Cardiff, etc. Not sure if they're still going. I know we've got Joe on the line and Jess, who might be able to come in and give us some advice on if they're still going, or if it's something that the CDPS can support with and get behind. I think that would be interesting. If anybody has any comments on that, we'd love to hear it. Or if you want to pick it up with me outside of this, well, then obviously we can do that as well. Anybody want to come in on that? If there's any out there that you know of. Hasn't happened since COVID, but it's ready to start again soon. Okay, Joe, lovely. We'll hook up with you on that. And obviously in a virtual world now, it doesn't necessarily have to be so geographically specific, so we can look at how we, with reach right across Wales, can help support maybe growing that. Liam, he's just saying he really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Liam. And then Paul, we aim to support the development of services for the third sector, wneud. Yes, so there's information there on wneud, which has recently been set up. Any further comments or questions?
I was just going to say, Edwina, that my team run something we call an innovation breakfast, which is basically a kind of morning meetup for service design research practitioners from anywhere, really. I mean, particularly public and third sector, but we're not fussy about that as well. I guess the best way to kind of know where that is, when that's going to happen, is following us on Twitter. And I think our Twitter handle is Barnardo's Lab.
Fabulous.
It looks a bit like Barnardo's slab, but it's Barnardo's lab.
Lovely, and thank you for offering that and extending that invite to this community here. That's great. We will put that into the write-up that we do at the end of this. I'm really conscious of time, so I am going to wrap us up. Thank you so much to both of our speakers, to Amelia and to Tom. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Much appreciated. I've certainly learned a lot. We have just sent a blog off for translation today, looking at the piece of work that we're doing around access and adult social care. And the blog is from the user researcher within that team, but also the team of observers that worked with her. So keep an eye on our blog post, on our blog for that blog post in a couple of days' time. It's definitely well worth a read. And it alludes to what Amelia said about user research really being a team sport and how everybody got involved. David from the National Library obviously also keen to share his experience as well. So he has committed to writing a blog post for us, which will be published in the new year, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to him in 2022. In terms of looking ahead to the new year, we can't believe how fast time is going, but we've got our next knowledge sharing webinar on the 18th of January, topic 2BC. So if you've any ideas on that, do let us know. And we've got 2 communities of practice in January then as well. So dates for the diary: building bilingual services on the 20th, and that's looking at bilingual content design. And then our communicating digital community of practice is on the 26th of January with a focus on internal communications, really bringing staff with you on the digital transformation journey. So it just remains for me to say diolch yn fawr, thank you so much, and Nadolig Llawen, which is Merry Christmas, and until next year. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.